I guess now we're going to move to the pros part of the program. So let's start. You are running a wearables company. You're competing with the likes of, let's see, Apple, Google, Samsung. Could be tricky. What's your sales pitch when somebody learns of you and says, "Life who?"
Well, yeah. When you say that, when you put it in that perspective, I wouldn't say we're there yet competing with those, but we will be. And I think part of the reason is, and what I believe is, I think the way it's going to happen is people are going to see other people wearing it. They're going to see someone with a
Right
life key, and I'm going to tap to pay for something, and they're going to see that there's no screen, there's no batteries. They're going to say, "What's that?" And then that's when we'll say, LifeKey. Well, this is the future of wearable tech. This is sort of redefining what we know about wearable tech. It doesn't mean more electronics. It doesn't mean more things to charge. It's about untethering and hiding those things and integrating those things in a way that we haven't seen yet.
So give me a high-level overview of how this works. I mean, you have a device that doesn't need charging, so what's the fun in that?
Well, the idea, when you think about sort of the promise of some of these technologies, and I go to things like Google Assistant and Alexa and the things that we're sort of getting out of our way, so to speak, those are always on, which is a little different. This is not always on. In fact, it's a passive device, and it works with a microchip that, by the way, can't be tracked all the time because there's no batteries, there's no power to this.
No privacy worries? That's not fun
Exactly,
at all.
right?
What am I going to write about?
Exactly. But the idea kind of came to me. One of my colleagues commutes to work on his bike each day, 25 miles. And the idea of something happening to him is there's a pretty good chance. I live in the middle of Wyoming on a little 2-lane highway that connects two communities. And I'm like, what if something happens to you? And he had this engraved bracelet with his wife's phone number on it. I'm like, that's it? That's still where we're at? It's, 100 years of that, chipping things in stones and whatever. So I really was sort of dwelling on that. And in the middle of Wyoming, believe it or not, we are sort of the pulse of blockchain legislation and cryptocurrency and all that stuff. A lot of that's coming out of Wyoming, believe it or not. We're a small, nimble startup in terms of states, and that's pretty fun. So that's been percolating in my mind. And that logic of public and private keys and information and all this stuff was always at the forefront of my mind. So fast forward to that time when I'm thinking about this bracelet, I'm like, there's all this data we have. There's all this information that I have that no one has access to, that I don't necessarily need to covet or protect because, if I have a medical condition, and I've met thousands of people so far that might have a medical condition, and I learned something really important because in the beginning, I'm like, it's all about safety. It's got to be secure. It's got to be HIPAA compliant. It's got to be all these things. But when you actually start having the conversations, they would wear it on a T-shirt. I'm a diabetic. I have a heart disease or whatever because it's about saving their life. And so that's what started it. NFC technology is what it uses. And
near field communication.
Yeah. So when we use Apple Pay, I went to the store today. Using Apple Pay. Well, this is a Google phone, but it's just synonymous now. It's the Kleenex. But when you tap to pay with your phone, that uses this thing called near field communication, and it's a subset of RFID. But that's what's in our bands. So instead of tapping on a point of sale system, I'm tapping on this band to then retrieve information. I don't need an app to do it. I can pull up my emergency medical info, any kind of details, notify my emergency contacts automatically, do all those things. So then it just kind of led to expanding the platform and saying, this doesn't exist. It needs an operating system. And that's where we came in.
All right. And so how do you actually get into the technology field? Because you originally started as a journalist. I can't believe you left these secure financial prospects of my profession for to be a startup. But how'd you get from there to here?
To be fair, Rob, I played a journalist on TV.
I've done that too.
I was a news anchor, so I don't know if I would go as far as calling me a journalist. But
well, Kent Brockman, at least.
Exactly. I left TV and went into a career in brand and marketing for an outdoor company. I loved it. It was super fun. We had all kinds of resources, which I was not used to being on the media side. And I developed this idea for a PR software platform called Pitch Engine. Launched it like 12 years ago at South by Southwest. In fact, that was the last time I was at South by Southwest.
It's good to have you back.
Microsoft BizSpark Accelerator back in the day. And we launched Pitch Engine. It's still a thing, believe it or not. But that got me thinking, like, thinking about technology and software and trying to solve problems with it. And I loved it, and launched several things in between, fun projects. But that's what got me to this technology place where I'm like, I think I can solve this problem in an innovative way, in a different way. Now, consequently, I'm learning about soft goods manufacturing and supply chains and like how do we integrate the technology.
Logistics.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about taking a piece of hardware, even though it's small and all these things, and trying to make it washable and waterproof and climb Everest and can go through the deserts on a motorcycle and all this other stuff.
So you've got the band. This is also going into a zipper.
Yeah, we just about a month ago at the Outdoor Retailer Show in Denver launched with YKK, the world's first smart zipper. So the idea is putting this technology into our existing garments, existing things, to make it invisible, to make it serve a purpose, but not be more distractions, more things.
So first of all, smart zipper is one of those phrases I did not think would be coming out of my mouth at any point, but life comes at you fast. So YKK is this giant company. They've been around forever. How did you get in touch with them? What was the introduction like?
Not only are they a giant company, it's 150 years old. They're a little bit like, it's a little slower moving than we're used to in the startup world. Japanese, based.
Revise the pitch deck a little bit.
Oh my gosh. But it was great. We launched at CES a couple of years ago, and pre-COVID actually. And we had a lot of these manufacturers saying, wait a second, we want to put this in our clothing, in our garments. And so when we started to have those conversations, one of those companies brought YKK to the table and said, what if we could put it in a zipper? So they were kind of responsible for making that marriage. The first LifeKey I designed was actually a zipper puller. You just hook it into your zipper, and that was the idea. But it was a little limiting because it was a very specific use case. But it's an amazing technology. If you think about, I've talked about some of the consumer uses of safety and tapping to pay and things like that. But from the garment perspective, it's authentication. It's like a digital birth certificate for a garment. It's I
guess YKK is a fraud problem they got to deal with.
Anti-counterfeiting, yeah,
right.
Exactly. Tap on it and know that it's the authentic Gucci bag or whatever.
So I did tap my phone on your band earlier. So walk people through what will happen in that case, because it was a pleasant surprise. I don't actually need to install an app to get utility out of this.
True. Yeah, what's cool about this operating system what we built is contextual. So when I tap it with my phone, it knows that it's my phone. And once I've registered the device, and then it acts differently. So I can tap it and just drop a pin and let my wife or my close contacts or my friends or my coworkers know where I'm at a given time, know that I landed, know that I'm in the car on the way, whatever it is. Just a nice little convenience thing. It doesn't track me the full time. It just sends that pin. If someone else taps my band, they get a different experience. They get my basic profile. They could download my contact card. They could, kind of do the About Me link tree type of thing. Or they can dig deeper and find any kind of emergency medical information I might have. And then again, if I tap it at a point of sale, I'll be able to pay for something. So I'll be able to give my kids a band, put $50 on it, say, go have fun. And I see all the transactions in my phone.
Very important, that last bit. So what are the typical sort of tech support questions you get from people then after, I guess, before purchasing one of these babies? What does it sell for, by the way? I got to ask that.
$25. It's cheap technology.
Reasonable.
I don't like that word cheap, but it's inexpensive technology.
Affordable.
And I think that, for us, it really will depend on how these things sort of manifest. What does a surfer need versus a skier? What does a bicyclist need versus an older elderly person in a village, in Florida? It's all different, and it's really exciting that way.
And what is your distribution like? Who are you selling through?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate. We've done this sort of interesting, started D2C and then went with wholesale and all these things. But we sell in Target. We sell to Target, Chewy.com, PetSmart. We're in Nordstrom, everything from Ron John surf shops.
I take it people are putting these on their dogs and cats too?
Yes, good point. So one of the things we did about a year in is we said this technology would be great on pets. So we created a product called Fetch, and Fetch is a smart dog tag. So you see the dog tag, you flip it over, there's instructions, you tap on it with your phone. The owner gets notified with a GPS location of your pet. You get the information off the pet. So it's like the whole chipping idea of your dog, except you don't need a vet and you don't need an RFID reader and you don't need to haul the dog somewhere. It's just all done right there, and those have been hugely popular.
I hadn't even thought of that use case. And so you've got iOS and Android apps. I have to ask, as a guy who writes about the app economy a lot, lots of app developers like to vent a little bit about their experience dealing with the review process and the cut each company takes of that. Would you like to add to that inventory of that airing of grievances?
Honestly, there's so many challenges around every corner with any new thing you're building, and I always feel like I'm the guy chopping down the trees trying to make the path. I'm always a little too far ahead, and so I'm trying to be patient with all this. But you run into those obstacles, and I think the app stores and sort of how Apple works versus Android and some of those things. They're definitely challenges at times. I try not to build things that are too dependent on other platforms, dependent on other things, and if I could make it autonomous from those things, it's a consideration.
It was only recently that Apple let third-party developers actually use the NFC reader on an iPhone,
Yes.
right?
Yes, and they really just had background scanning available after the iPhone X, and so iPhone 10, I guess. It's one of those things that for me it was a big gamble. I mean, I believed in this technology, but I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know. They could have just taken it out of the phone. And fortunately, it's picked up. It's gaining momentum. The use cases are going to get better. People like to compare it to other technologies that are out there, but it's so different than things like QR codes and some of these things that we've sort of adopted since COVID.
So what is next on that path? I don't want to say chopping through the forest. That sounds bad environmentally. What's next on your journey?
For us, the big initiative right now is to launch our tap to pay functionality. In the US, there's the Apple Watch, there's the Google devices, so anything that's Wear OS. There's Garmin and there's Samsung. Those are the only watches I can put on my wrist and pay for something with. And those are watches. Those are electronics. They're more of your phone, but on your wrist. This is none of that. And so we're going to have wristbands, no batteries, no charging, and then be able to integrate it into clothing and other things. And you'll be able to tap to pay and do other things. Maybe it's access control. Maybe it's access your Tesla or whatever you've got parked out there, Rob.
My car's back in the driveway in D.C.
Okay, get on the plane.
Although actually, I'm not sure I want the keys to a Tesla on something that I can just lose.
Totally. But that's the immediate future. The future I see is I see this world differently. My goal was always to, I looked at this thing and this is awesome. Like it does everything. It doesn't do everything the best. Like these cameras out here are a little bit better than this camera. These, there's probably better phones even now than your phone. I don't know. But the idea is that I see a world where we can use this type of technology to accomplish things that we didn't do before. So when you're in an airport and you see that big list of all the departing flights and it's up there, you're trying to find yours, and then it flickers away and goes to the next screen, and you got to wait for that one to come
wait
back.
5 minutes for it to.
Wouldn't it be cool if I could
around.
just walk up, tap my band, see my info, and move on? Like that's the world I see. I go up to a computer, a desktop computer, tap on it with an NFC reader, and access my stuff. Tap on your phone, maybe. Maybe I want to access things on your phone. So I just see a world where that individual identity becomes a little more important and accessible, really, all the data we have.
Indeed. All right, well, now is the point where you all can ask some of the questions. First of all, if you're going to ask, you don't have a dumb zipper. It's a feature zipper, so don't feel bad about that. If you got a question, raise your hand or just speak loudly. Otherwise, I'll come up with more things to quiz you about. Yeah.
What was the inspo for all of this with the health side of it? Like, what made you really go for this?
For me, it was that coworker of mine who happens to be out here, who was a cyclist, and I was like, man, what do you do if something happens? And I'm like, there's such a better way to activate all this. But then you start looking at the existing technologies like Bluetooth and satellite, and it's like that's all right, but it's heavy. It's batteries and charging and thinking about it. And I'm like, how can we do that? And so I'm like, everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has a phone, a first responder, whoever. So if they could access that data, that would really start to open things up. And so that's how I started on the medical side. But then once I kind of got into it, it was everything from dementia patients and organizations around dementia to my kid has a blood disease, to my dad has heart disease, or he just had a stroke and I'm taking care of him. How can I provide this info to the nurse? It's amazing the stuff we can do. it's a huge nut to crack, and it's like one use case in a like a amusement park of use cases. And so that's another hard thing, is like staying focused, trying to become a consumer brand, do all these things in the right order.
All right, so I've got a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So supply chain issues have become something we just didn't think about before. And then we're like, oh, right, yeah, the large ships have to cross the Pacific Ocean and deliver things to U.S. ports. What has the past year or so taught you about that?
Oh my gosh. We haven't been impacted so much by our own supply chain. But what I've learned is, when working with these bigger garment manufacturers and some of these national brands, international brands, they have the problem with it. They need to understand where things are coming from. There's a huge problem with the counterfeiting as well, because if you can just put not authentic down in this North Face jacket, for example, and bring it over quicker, maybe you want to cut a corner, or maybe a factory does and they don't even know. And so that was really interesting. It's amazing, though, the things that need to be sort of tracked or accounted for that aren't. I've had people wanting to track uranium to put in fighter jets. Like, it's everything. It's everything that I could sort of quantify and say, hey, I received this. I need a sort of check and balance. I mean, the idea of like signing a piece of paper, that's where we're at still. Like, hey, I received this on the dock. Okay, sure you did, right? So I think that's that I've learned a lot about that in the last year or two. And in terms of relying on different countries, different cultures, different whatever to do manufacturing, that's a huge nut to crack. I think it's just as an entrepreneur and in my own family and my own neighbors and everything, to say, well, you shouldn't make things in China. It's like, well, okay, that's great.
Is that made in
Where
China?
do I make it? It depends on what the product is, but
Right.
we have a silicone factory that's in China, and your friends and family are like, well, you shouldn't do that. It's like, I agree.
Right.
But I got to do something.
Where am I going to do it?
Yeah, and this assumption that we have it down the street, it just isn't real. And so it's hard to sort of get that to happen, especially when you're small numbers and all
Right,
that
right.
thing.
Do we have another question from the audience?
Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah, here's what your primary target market is and who you try to market this to.
People from the future. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Customers that don't exist yet? That doesn't sound good.
It's a constant. It's actually a pretty much a daily discussion for us right now, because the use cases morph so much. We started in medical. It was definitely active lifestyle. So we were sort of in this outdoor industry with the likes of outdoor brands, and then it was workwear. We talked to the biggest workwear company and about putting it in there because these are people on a job site doing construction. They might get hurt. It was all that stuff. But now, as we move into more mainstream technology, and as Rob so graciously put me right in the mix there with Apple and Google, that's where we want to be. And I think it's definitely an early adopter. It obviously probably skews younger, but I think active lifestyle is a pretty generic term. We're all pretty active, right? The oldest person I know could be active if they walk around the block. So it's an interesting thing. It's a little bit futurist where we want to go, but I think that's where we want to be. And what's more is I think it speaks more to where do people want to be. So are we kind of tired of electronics? Am I tired about the weight of thinking about all the crap I've got to charge? Right?
Oh, yes.
The cables I've got to have. What do I do when I get there? What do I do if I get there? And what if I travel overseas? And it's so heavy. And I'm like, how can I sort of help people? I like technology. I really like technology. I don't love electronics. I don't really understand electronics. So how can I find this happy medium and leverage that?
So should we expect to see this sold in like an REI store in a year or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are the types of companies you'll see us at, but also probably mainstream. We really like direct to consumer.
Right.
That's a really fun place to be, and I think as we develop and you start to see our plans and our products, hopefully it becomes the cool thing to do, and also a way to sort of focus on what you're about.
Yeah, the other thing, wondering like Apple stores, it seems that they get a ton of foot traffic, but I have to imagine that is such a tough nut to crack to get in there.
I'm the thing. Well, I don't know that it's, maybe it could be. It's more like it could cannibalize what they do. and I'm really good at that. I've had startups that cannibalize other things, and so I don't make a lot of fans along the way, but I either have fans or enemies, and that's kind of where I live.
All right. We got on time. All right. We don't want to run into any stoppage time here. Thank you so much, Jason. This was awesome.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.